Gabriella Washington watched the banker's smile vanish upon seeing her ID. "This can't be yours," he sneered, tossing her identification onto the marble floor. 20 minutes later, she canceled the $2 billion partnership with his bank. Nobody heard her leave. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. What would you do if someone threw your dreams on the floor? Let's find out how Gabriella responded to this moment that changed everything. The evening before the bank incident, Gabriella Washington stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse office, gazing at the Detroit skyline. At 38, she had transformed from a girl in one of the city's toughest neighborhoods to the founder and CEO of Neurotech, a revolutionary AI healthcare company valued at $5.8 billion. Tomorrow would mark the culmination of years of work, a $2 billion partnership with National Trust Bank that would expand her neural interface technology to hospitals across the country. "Ms. Washington, your mother is on line 1, her assistant, Taylor Phillips, announced through the intercom. Gabriella smiled, pressing the speaker button. "Hi, Mom." "Baby girl, my lord, I just saw your face on the business channel again. The neighborhood association had a viewing party at Mrs. Jenkins's house." Gabriella laughed, picturing the elderly women who had helped raise her while her mother worked 3 separate jobs. "I hope they served your sweet potato pie." "You know it. Everyone's so proud. Your father would have been too, God rest his soul." The mention of her father, who had died when she was 12, brought a familiar ache. He had been the first to put a computer in her hands, salvaging parts from his job at the electronics recycling center. "I know, Mom. I'm thinking about him today." After hanging up, Gabriella's phone rang again immediately. The warm glow from her mother's call vanished as she saw the name on the caller ID, Harold Bennett, Regional Director of National Trust Bank. "Gabriella Washington," she answered, her voice shifting to its professional register. "Ms. Washington, just confirming our appointment tomorrow at 10. Our team is quite eager to finalize this partnership." His tone was clipped, businesslike, a stark contrast to her mother's warmth. "I'll be there, Mr. Bennett. My legal team has reviewed all documents." "Excellent. Oh, and I'll see you tonight at the Science Innovation Gala. Correct? I understand you're receiving an award." "Yes, I'll be there." "Wonderful. These events are excellent for publicity. The photos of us together will make a splendid addition to our annual report." After ending the call, Gabriella stared at her reflection in the window. The bank needed her innovation as much as she needed their financial infrastructure, yet Bennett always spoke as if he were doing her a favor. She turned to the framed newspaper article on her wall, her first major feature in the Wall Street Journal 5 years ago. The headline read, "Neurotech Breakthrough, Detroit Woman's Neural Interface Saves Lives." She remembered how some investors had initially refused to meet with her, only changing their minds when her technology began saving patients others had deemed untreatable. Her journey had begun in that small Detroit apartment where she and her mother had lived. Despite attending underfunded schools, Gabriella's mathematical brilliance had been undeniable. Her middle school teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, had fought to get her into a competitive science program, where Gabriella was often the only black student and certainly the only one from her neighborhood. The prejudice had started early. In 8th grade, she had won the state mathematics competition, only to overhear one of the judges suggesting she must have cheated. In high school, a guidance counselor had recommended she pursue something more realistic than computer science. Yet by her senior year, her perfect SAT scores and national recognition in coding competitions had earned her a full scholarship to MIT. College had brought its own challenges. Professors who never called on her in class. Study groups that mysteriously had no room for another member. A roommate who moved out after the first semester without explanation. Through it all, Gabriella had maintained her focus, graduating at the top of her class. Her early career had been a series of closed doors and stolen ideas. At her first tech job, a supervisor had presented her algorithm improvement as his own. At a startup, she had been passed over for promotion in favor of a less qualified white colleague. After 3 years of hitting glass ceilings, she had taken her savings and founded Neuratech in a tiny office in Detroit's emerging tech corridor. The breakthrough had come after 2 years of 18-hour days. Her neural interface technology allowed for unprecedented communication between artificial intelligence and the human brain, enabling treatments for previously incurable neurological conditions. When a 7-year-old girl with a rare form of epilepsy became the first patient to become seizure-free using Gabriella's device, investors had finally started calling. Now, Neuratech employed over 300 people, had treated thousands of patients, and was on the verge of this historic partnership with National Trust Bank. The deal would provide the financial structure to expand production and reach hospitals that served underprivileged communities, the driving purpose behind Gabriella's work. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jordan Chen, her CFO and closest friend since college. "Car picking you up at 7 for the gala. Wear the blue dress. It makes you look like the financial badass you are." Gabriella smiled. Jordan had stood by her through the darkest times, from the death of her college boyfriend to the near bankruptcy of Neuratech in its 2nd year. She texted back, "Blue dress it is, prepared for fake smiles and backhanded compliments." Jordan's response came quickly, "And ready to outshine them all." As her stylist arrived to help her prepare for the evening, Gabriella thought about tomorrow's bank signing. After years of struggle, Neuratech would finally have the resources to realize her vision on a global scale. She just had to get through one more night of navigating the subtle prejudices of the business elite, something she had mastered as thoroughly as she had neural algorithms. What she couldn't know was that the true test wouldn't come at the gala, but in the marble-floored lobby of National Trust Bank, where everything she had built would suddenly hang in the balance. The grand ballroom of the Detroit Institute of Innovation glittered with crystal chandeliers and the diamonds of the city's elite. As Gabriella stepped from the limousine in her sapphire blue gown, camera flashes erupted. She smiled with practiced poise, her natural beauty enhanced by subtle makeup that emphasized her deep brown eyes and high cheekbones. "Ms. Washington, over here," called photographers from various business publications. Gabriella turned, giving them the confident smile that had graced magazine covers. Tonight was a celebration not just of her personal achievement, but of Neuratech's mission, a mission she would further with tomorrow's bank partnership. Inside, waiters circulated with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. Gabriella accepted a glass, scanning the room for familiar faces. Before she could take a sip, the Institute's director, Philip Armstrong, approached. "The woman of the hour, Gabriella, your donation of $1 million to our inner-city tech programs is extraordinary. The board is thrilled. Education changed my life, Philip. Those programs reach kids like I once was." "Indeed, indeed," Armstrong nodded, then leaned closer. "Harold Bennett from National Trust is eager to speak with you. Quite the coup, securing that partnership." She followed his gaze to where Harold stood with a group of older white executives. At 55, Harold maintained the physique of someone who considered regular golf sufficient exercise. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his tuxedo custom-tailored. As Gabriella approached, she overheard a fragment of conversation. "Have to admit, these diversity initiatives occasionally yield surprising talent." The men laughed, then fell silent as they noticed her. Gabriella maintained her smile, having long ago mastered the art of pretending not to hear such comments. "Ah, excuse me," said Harold, turning to a waiter nearby. "We need another round here." Gabriella realized with a chill that he had mistaken her for waitstaff, despite her designer gown and the press attention she'd received upon arrival. "Actually, Mr. Bennett," she said smoothly, "I'm Gabriella Washington. We spoke earlier today about tomorrow's signing." Harold's face registered shock, then embarrassment, finally settling into a tight smile. "Ms. Washington, forgive me. The lighting in here is dreadful." He gestured to his companions. "Gentlemen, this is the innovative mind behind Neuratech. The introductions that followed were a familiar dance of microaggressions. "You're so articulate," said one, surprise evident in his voice. "Fascinating company you've built. Who handles the technical aspects for you?" asked another. "Where did you learn about finance?" inquired a third, as if her Harvard MBA were inconceivable. Gabriella addressed each comment with grace honed through years of similar interactions. "I lead our technical team personally, though we have brilliant engineers, and I find finance quite straightforward compared to neural mapping algorithms." As the conversation continued, Gabriella excused herself to greet other guests. Moving through the crowd, she felt the familiar weight of being both highly visible and somehow invisible simultaneously, a paradox familiar to many successful black women in white-dominated spaces. Near the bar, she spotted Jordan Chen, elegant in a tailored tuxedo. Her CFO's presence instantly eased some of her tension. "These people are exhausting," Jordan whispered as they hugged. "I've already heard 3 comments about how surprising it is that our neural interface works so well." "Only 3? You're lucky," Gabriella laughed. "I was just mistaken for a server by our future banking partner." Jordan's eyes widened. "Bennett, please tell me you're joking." "Wish I were, but it's nothing new." She sipped her champagne. "Tomorrow, when the partnership is signed, none of this will matter. We'll finally get our technology into the hospitals that need it most." They were interrupted by the sharp voice of Cecilia Vanderbilt, heiress to one of the city's banking fortunes and a board member of several competing healthcare companies. "Gabriella Washington," Cecilia said, her tone suggesting the name tasted unusual on her tongue. "Quite the meteoric rise you've had. One wonders about such sudden wealth." Gabriella felt Jordan tense beside her, but placed a calming hand on her friend's arm. "Hardly sudden, Cecilia. Neurotech is 8 years old, and I spent a decade in the industry before founding it. But I understand how innovation might seem sudden to those more accustomed to inherited positions." Cecilia's perfectly lipsticked mouth tightened. "Innovation is one thing. Sustainability is another. I hope National Trust has done their due diligence." As Cecilia walked away, Jordan muttered, "One day, I'm going to forget my professional demeanor around that woman." "Don't waste your energy," Gabriella replied, though the encounter had left her unsettled. Making her way toward the ladies' room for a moment of peace, Gabriella passed a partially open door to a small meeting room. Harold Bennett's voice drifted out clearly. "Of course, the partnership looks good for our diversity obligations. The board's been breathing down my neck about the PR disaster last quarter. Washington's company gives us tech credibility and satisfies the inclusion quotas in one neat package." A male voice responded, "But $2 billion is significant exposure. Is her technology really worth the investment, or is this just a PR stunt?" "The technology seems solid enough," Harold replied, "though I have my team double-checking everything. These overnight success stories often have hidden flaws, but the optics are perfect. Helping a black female entrepreneur from Detroit plays beautifully in the press." Gabriella continued walking, her face betraying nothing, though her heart raced. The partnership she had worked years to secure was viewed by Bennett as little more than a publicity stunt. Her company's groundbreaking technology that had already saved hundreds of lives, reduced to seeming solid enough. In the quiet of the restroom, she stared at her reflection. The woman who looked back had endured countless dismissals, had been underestimated at every turn, had fought for every opportunity. Tomorrow's signing wasn't charity. National Trust needed Neurotech's innovation as much as Neurotech needed their financial structure. By the time Gabriella returned to the ballroom, the award ceremony was beginning. She took her seat at the front table, where Jordan had saved her a place. "Everything okay?" Jordan whispered, noting Gabriella's expression. "I'll tell you later," she replied as the Institute's director took the stage. When Philip Armstrong called her name, the applause was thunderous, though Gabriella noted several tables, including Harold Bennett's, where the enthusiasm seemed muted. At the podium, bathed in spotlight, Gabriella set aside the standard acceptance speech she had prepared. Instead, she spoke from the heart. Thank you for this honor. When I was 12, growing up in East Detroit, my father brought home a broken computer from the recycling center where he worked. Fix it, he told me, and it's yours. 3 weeks later, I had my first computer. She paused, looking across the sea of privileged faces. Many of you were born into worlds where doors opened automatically. I've had to pick locks my entire life. Every no became a challenge, every dismissal a motivation. Neurotech exists not because the path was clear, but because I refused to accept that it could be blocked. The silence in the room was complete, uncomfortable for some, inspiring for others. Our neural interface technology is saving lives that the medical establishment had written off. Tomorrow, we expand that reach through a new partnership. But tonight, I want to acknowledge everyone who's been told they don't belong in rooms like this one. Your brilliance isn't diminished by others' failure to recognize it. Break barriers. Build anyway. The standing ovation that followed was immediate from much of the crowd, though Gabriella couldn't help noticing that Harold Bennett and his associates remained seated, offering only perfunctory applause. As the evening wound down and Gabriella prepared to leave, she found herself wondering about tomorrow's bank meeting. The overheard conversation had planted seeds of doubt, not about her company's value, but about whether National Trust truly saw themselves as equal partners rather than benevolent patrons. In the limousine heading home, Jordan finally asked, "What happened before the ceremony? You changed your speech." Gabriella recounted the conversation she had overheard. Jordan's expression darkened. "We could find another bank. The terms with First Detroit weren't that different." "No," Gabriella said firmly. "National Trust has the infrastructure we need for the hospital expansion." Bennett's attitude is unfortunate, but not surprising. Once the partnership is signed, the work speaks for itself. As the car pulled up to her building, Gabriella felt a familiar determination settling over her. Tomorrow would be another day of proving herself, of exceeding low expectations, of turning skepticism into grudging respect. It was a dance she knew well. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would test not just her professional resolve, but her personal dignity in ways she couldn't anticipate, and force a decision that would reverberate far beyond the walls of National Trust Bank. The morning sun streamed through Gabriella's bedroom windows as her alarm chimed at precisely 6 o'clock. Today was the day, the culmination of 8 years of building Neurotech from a concept into a company that would soon secure a $2 billion partnership with one of the nation's largest banks. Her morning routine was methodical, a ritual that centered her for important days. 30 minutes of meditation, a 5-mile run on her treadmill, a protein-rich breakfast. As she showered, Gabriella mentally reviewed the partnership terms once more. The documents were standard, thoroughly vetted by her legal team. By noon, Neurotech would have the financial infrastructure to expand its neural interface technology to hospitals across the country. Gabriella chose her wardrobe carefully. A tailored charcoal suit with subtle burgundy pinstripes, a cream silk blouse, and her signature accessory, a hand-carved wooden pendant her father had made, polished to a high shine and set in silver. Professional, powerful, yet authentically herself. "You've got this," she told her reflection, applying a final touch of lipstick. "You've earned this." The drive to National Trust Bank's headquarters took 20 minutes in her Tesla Model S. The building itself was a statement of old money and established power. 20 stories of limestone and glass in downtown Detroit, with National Trust emblazoned in gold lettering above the main entrance. As Gabriella pulled into the parking garage, she noticed a security guard watching her intently. When she emerged from her car, he approached immediately. "Can I help you, ma'am?" His tone suggested she needed direction rather than offering assistance. "I'm here for a meeting," Gabriella replied calmly, used to such interactions. "Do you have an appointment?" he pressed, looking pointedly at her car, then back at her. "Yes, with Harold Bennett. I'm Gabriella Washington, CEO of Neurotech." The guard's expression flickered with surprise, then doubt. "I'll need to see some ID." Gabriella produced her driver's license, which the guard scrutinized longer than necessary before reluctantly stepping aside. "Main lobby is through those doors and to the right." "Thank you. I've been here before," she replied, keeping her tone neutral despite the unnecessary checkpoint. In the main lobby, with its soaring ceilings and marble floors, Gabriella approached the reception desk. Two young white women sat behind it, both looking up as she approached. "Good morning. I have a 10 o'clock appointment with Harold Bennett, Gabriella Washington from Neuratech." The receptionist typed on her keyboard, frowning slightly. "I don't see you on Mr. Bennett's calendar. Are you sure about the time?" "Absolutely. It's for the partnership signing. Mr. Bennett's executive assistant confirmed yesterday." The receptionist exchanged glances with her colleague. "One moment, please." After a brief phone conversation, she directed Gabriella to take a seat in the waiting area. 10 minutes passed, then 15. At 9:55, just 5 minutes before the scheduled signing, a different receptionist approached. "Ms. Washington, I'm afraid there's been a confusion. Mr. Bennett's calendar shows the signing at 11, not 10. However, you're welcome to wait in our customer service area, where it's more comfortable." Rather than being escorted to the executive floor, Gabriella found herself directed to the retail banking area, a clear deviation from protocol for a $2 billion partnership signing. Something felt wrong, but she maintained her professional composure. The customer service area was busy with regular banking clients. Gabriella approached an available teller, a young white man whose nameplate read Calvin Reynolds. "Excuse me, I'm here for a meeting with Harold Bennett. There seems to be some confusion about the time." Calvin looked up, his customer service smile automatic. "What's this regarding?" "I'm Gabriella Washington, CEO of Neuratech. We're signing a partnership agreement today." The smile remained fixed, but Calvin's eyes registered disbelief. "And you need to see Mr. Bennett specifically?" "Yes, he's the regional director overseeing our partnership." Calvin's expression shifted to one of patronizing patience. "Ma'am, Mr. Bennett handles major corporate accounts. Perhaps you're looking for our small business department or personal banking." The familiar sting of being underestimated prickled along Gabriella's spine, but she kept her voice steady. "No, I'm quite certain. Neuratech is finalizing a $2 billion partnership with National Trust today. Mr. Bennett and I discussed it yesterday at the Science Innovation Gala." Calvin's smile faltered. "$2 billion? There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake," Gabriella said firmly. "Please call Mr. Bennett's office." "I'll need to see some identification first," Calvin said, his tone now skeptical. Gabriella opened her purse and presented both her driver's license and her Neuratech business card. Calvin took them, examining her license with exaggerated scrutiny, comparing the photo to her face multiple times. "This doesn't look like you," he said finally. "It was taken 3 years ago. I had different glasses and shorter hair." Calvin flipped the license over, then back. "And you're claiming to be the CEO of a company signing a $2 billion deal?" "I am the CEO of Neuratech," Gabriella corrected. "We're a neural interface technology company valued at $5.8 billion as of our last funding round." Calvin's face hardened. "Ma'am, if you're attempting to access someone's accounts fraudulently—" "I'm attempting to attend a scheduled meeting," Gabriella interrupted, her patience wearing thin. "Please call Mr. Bennett's office immediately." Other customers were beginning to stare. Calvin lowered his voice. "This ID can't be yours." "Excuse me?" "This ID, it can't be yours," he repeated, his tone making it clear what he meant, that someone like her couldn't possibly be who she claimed to be. Have you ever been in a situation where someone assumed you couldn't be qualified for your position because of how you look? Comment number 1 if you've experienced this kind of prejudice firsthand, and hit that like button if you believe appearances should never determine how people are treated. Subscribe to hear more stories about standing up against discrimination. Before Gabriella could respond, Calvin made a show of examining the ID one final time, then deliberately dropped it onto the marble floor between them. "Oops," he said, making no move to pick it up. The moment crystallized for Gabriella, the culmination of countless small humiliations now made physical and public. The ID card lay between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Slowly, deliberately, Gabriella bent and retrieved her license from the floor. When she straightened, her voice was ice. "Call security," she said. Calvin smirked. "That's exactly what I was about to do." He reached for his phone. "We have a woman here attempting to access executive accounts with what appears to be a fraudulent ID." Other customers had begun recording with their phones. Gabriella stood perfectly still, her expression revealing nothing of the rage and humiliation burning inside her. Within minutes, 2 security guards approached. The older one addressed Calvin. "What's the situation?" "This woman claims to be the CEO of some tech company here for a billion-dollar meeting. The ID doesn't match. Possible fraud attempt." The security guard turned to Gabriella. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us." "No," Gabriella said calmly. "You're going to call Harold Bennett's office right now and inform him that Gabriella Washington is being detained in the lobby." "Ma'am, do it now, or the lawsuits will begin with you personally." Something in her tone gave the guard pause. He stepped away and made a call. Gabriella could see Calvin watching with a mixture of confusion and lingering smugness. The other customers continued staring, some still recording. 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Harold Bennett emerged with 2 assistants trailing behind him. His face paled when he saw Gabriella standing between the security guards. "Ms. Washington, what on earth is happening here?" "Your employee threw my identification on the floor and accused me of fraud," Gabriella said, her voice carrying in the now silent lobby. "After I was misdirected from the executive floor to customer service, despite our scheduled signing." Harold's expression shifted from shock to mortification as he realized the implications and noticed the recording phones. "This is outrageous. A terrible misunderstanding. Please, come upstairs immediately." "No," Gabriella said, the single word dropping like a stone. What?" Harold stammered. "I said no. There will be no signing today." Harold stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ms. Washington, please. This was clearly a terrible mistake by an untrained employee. The partnership is too important to both our organizations to let this unfortunate incident derail it." "Is it?" Gabriella asked, maintaining eye contact. "Last night, I overheard you describing our partnership as a PR stunt and a way to meet your diversity obligations. Now, I arrive for our signing and am treated like a criminal. This doesn't strike me as a mistake, Mr. Bennett. It strikes me as a culture." Harold's face flushed. "That's not—" "You misunderstood. I understand perfectly," Gabriella interrupted. "Please inform your board that Neuratech will be pursuing other banking relationships. Good day." As she turned to leave, Harold called after her. "You can't just walk away from a $2 billion deal over a misunderstanding." Gabriella paused, then turned back. "Watch me." The lobby remained silent as she walked out, head high, not a single person moving to stop her. As the glass doors closed behind her, the whispers began, but Gabriella didn't hear them. In her mind, she was already planning her next moves. What would you do if you were Gabriella? Would you walk away from a billion-dollar deal on principle, or try to work through the humiliation? Comment number 1, if you'd stand your ground like she did. Or number 2, if you'd handle it differently. Now, let's see how this decision sent shockwaves through the business world. The interior of Gabriella's Tesla became a sanctuary of silence. She sat motionless behind the wheel in the bank's parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles paled against her brown skin. The professional mask she had maintained inside the bank crumbled, revealing the raw emotions beneath: rage, humiliation, and a bone-deep exhaustion from the constant battle to be respected in spaces that weren't designed for her. A single tear escaped before she could stop it, trailing down her cheek. Gabriella wiped it away with an angry gesture. She hadn't cried over professional setbacks since her early 20s, when a supervisor had taken credit for her algorithm. That day, she had vowed never to give anyone that power over her again. As her breathing steadied, Fragments of similar incidents throughout her life flickered through her mind. The high school science fair where judges had questioned if she really understood her own project. The college professor who had suggested she might be more comfortable in African American studies than computer science. The venture capitalist who had addressed all his questions to Jordan during their first funding pitch, despite Gabriella being the founder and technical expert. Each time, she had swallowed the insult, worked harder, proved herself beyond any doubt. Each victory had come at the cost of her dignity, a price she had told herself was worth paying to build something meaningful. But having her ID thrown on the floor, being publicly humiliated in the lobby of the very institution that supposedly valued her company enough for a multi-billion-dollar partnership, had crossed a line she hadn't fully recognized until it was breached. Gabriella reached for her phone and called Jordan. "How'd it go? Champagne ready at the office?" Jordan's voice was bright with anticipation. "It didn't," Gabriella replied, her voice steady despite the emotion still churning inside her. "What do you mean? Did they try to change terms last minute? The bank teller threw my ID on the floor and called security on me." A shocked silence followed. "What? Gabriella, are you serious?" "Deadly serious. I walked out. The deal is off." Another pause. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Where are you?" "Still in their parking garage. I'm leaving now. Meet me at the office." "Are you okay to drive?" "I'm fine." She wasn't, but she needed movement, action. "Gabriella." 10 minutes, Jordan. We need to strategize." The drive to Neurotech's headquarters in Detroit's revitalized tech corridor helped clear Gabriella's mind. By the time she arrived at the sleek glass building with the company's neural network logo emblazoned on its facade, her focus had shifted from personal affront to professional crisis management. In the executive conference room, Jordan waited with Timothy Okafor, Neurotech's legal counsel, and Sofia Rodriguez, their head of public relations. Their faces registered shock as Gabriella recounted what had happened. "Jesus," Timothy muttered when she finished. "The liability for them is enormous. We could sue for discrimination, breach of good faith." "I don't want to sue," Gabriella interrupted. "I want to find another banking partner." "Gabriella," Sofia said gently, "from a PR perspective, this could actually work in our favor if we handle it right. Being the victim of discrimination." "I'm not a victim," Gabriella cut in sharply. "And I won't be positioned as one. This isn't about generating sympathy or leveraging outrage. It's about partnering with institutions that respect us fundamentally." Jordan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "The financial implications are significant. We've structured our expansion around this partnership. Pulling out means delays, potentially losing our first-mover advantage in several markets." "I understand that," Gabriella said. "But I need all of you to understand something too. When that teller threw my ID on the floor, he wasn't just disrespecting me personally. He was expressing a culture that would have infected every aspect of our partnership. If that's how they treat the CEO during the courtship phase, imagine the subtle ways they'd undermine us once the contracts were signed." Timothy nodded slowly. "You're right, but the board will have questions." "The board will have to trust my judgment," Gabriella replied. "I founded this company because I believed neural interface technology could save lives that the medical establishment had written off. That mission hasn't changed. The path to achieving it has." As they discussed contingency plans, Gabriella's phone began buzzing with notifications. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. "What's happening?" she asked, glancing at her screen. Sofia was already checking her tablet. "The incident is going viral. Someone in the bank lobby recorded the whole thing and posted it online. It's being picked up by tech blogs, now business publications. #banking while black is trending." "Damage control," Gabriella said immediately. "For us or them?" Jordan asked. "Both. We need a clear factual statement. No emotionality, no victimhood narrative." Sofia nodded, already drafting. "What about National Trust's response? They're calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding by a junior employee." "Of course they are," Gabriella said, a bitter smile touching her lips. As if on cue, her phone rang. Harold Bennett. She sent it to voicemail. Over the next hour, the situation escalated. National Trust's PR team sent 3 increasingly desperate settlement offers, culminating in a proposal for a public apology from their CEO and improved partnership terms. Meanwhile, Neurotech's investors began calling, concerned about the abrupt change in plans. "William Preston is demanding an immediate board meeting," Timothy reported, hanging up from a call. "He's using terms like emotional decision-making and fiduciary responsibility." Preston was Neurotech's largest external investor, a venture capitalist who had initially refused to meet with Gabriella until her prototype had proven successful in clinical trials. He had made hundreds of millions on his investment, but had never quite overcome his skepticism about having a black woman as CEO. "Schedule it for tomorrow," Gabriella decided. "By then, we'll have alternative partnership proposals to present." Jordan looked up from her laptop. "Already getting interest?" "First, Detroit Bank just reached out, and there's an email from United Financial Group." As the team worked, Gabriella received a text from an unexpected source. The teller, Calvin Reynolds. Somehow, he had obtained her personal number. "You've ruined my life," the message read. "I've been fired because of you. National Trust was my dream job. I hope you're satisfied playing the race card over a simple misunderstanding." Gabriella stared at the message, then silently handed her phone to Jordan, who read it and swore under her breath. "Block and document," Jordan advised. "He's looking for a reaction he can use against you." Gabriella nodded, but the message had struck a nerve. How easily her professional decision was reduced to playing the race card. How readily her dignity was considered less important than Calvin Reynolds's dream job. As evening fell, Gabriella sat alone in her office, reviewing the day's developments. National Trust Bank's stock had dropped 8% following the viral video. #banking while black had become the top trending hashtag nationally. 3 other black executives had come forward with similar experiences at National Trust branches. Yet alongside the support came an ugly backlash. Gabriella's social media accounts had been flooded with racist messages. Several anonymous accounts had posted conspiracy theories about Neurotech's technology being fraudulent. One particularly disturbing post had included her home address with a threat. Her phone rang, her mother this time. Gabriella took a deep breath before answering. "Baby girl, are you okay? I saw the video." Her mother's voice was tight with concern. "I'm fine, Mom. Just handling the fallout." "Those people." Her mother's voice trailed off, heavy with recognition of a familiar pattern. "You did right walking away. Your father would have been proud." "Thanks, Mom." Gabriella hesitated. "They're saying I overreacted, that I'm putting the company at risk over a personal slight. Is that what you believe?" "No, but..." "Then stand your ground. You built something from nothing, against every obstacle. Nobody gets to throw your identification on the floor and still get your business. Not for all the money in the world." After the call, Gabriella noticed an email alert. The investor she had been courting for international expansion was reconsidering their position given recent events. The email euphemistically suggested that Gabriella might be difficult to work with and questioned her temperament for leadership. Simultaneously, Jordan sent a concerning report. Someone was coordinating a short-selling attack on Neurotech's stock, driving the price down in after-hours trading. The coincidental timing suggested a deliberate attempt to punish Gabriella's decision. As midnight approached, Gabriella stood at her office window, looking out at the Detroit skyline. The city that had shaped her, with all its resilience and scars, sprawled before her. She had walked away from $2 billion today on principle, a principle that some would never understand and others would deliberately misrepresent. For the first time since founding Neurotech, she wondered if she had risked too much. Not just money, but the company itself. The technology that was saving lives. The jobs she had created. The example she set for young black girls with dreams of STEM careers. Tomorrow's board meeting loomed. William Preston would argue that her decision was emotional rather than strategic. He would suggest, perhaps not explicitly, that a different CEO, one less personally affected by racial dynamics, might make more objective decisions. Gabriella's reflection stared back at her from the darkened glass. The woman who had overcome every obstacle to build a multi-billion-dollar company. The woman who had refused to let her ID remain on the marble floor of National Trust Bank. She straightened her shoulders. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain. She would not apologize for demanding basic dignity. Whatever came next, that principle would remain non-negotiable. By dawn, what had begun as a personal confrontation in a bank lobby had exploded into a national conversation about race, power, and corporate responsibility. Gabriella's decision to walk away from the $2 billion partnership dominated business news headlines. Neuratech CEO cancels $2 billion deal after bank teller incident. Viral video shows black female CEO confronted at National Trust. Markets react as banking giant faces discrimination allegations. As Gabriella prepared for the emergency board meeting, Jordan entered her office with the latest updates. National Trust stock opened down 12%, Jordan reported. Their damage control is in full swing. They've issued a formal apology, fired Calvin Reynolds publicly, and announced a comprehensive review of customer service protocols. Treating the symptom, not the disease, Gabriella observed. Adjusting her blazer, she had chosen a bold red suit today. No hiding, no apologies. Meanwhile, our phones are ringing off the hook. 8 different banks have reached out about partnership opportunities, including 3 offering better terms than National Trust. Any word from Preston? Jordan's expression tightened. He's rallying other board members. The line he's pushing is that, while the incident was unfortunate, walking away from a signed deal demonstrates emotional decision-making unbecoming of a CEO. The deal wasn't signed, Gabriella pointed out. Facts aren't his strong suit when he's on a mission. Jordan hesitated. There's something else. Reynolds gave an interview this morning to Conservative Business Daily. He's claiming he was made a scapegoat and that you overreacted to standard security protocols. Gabriella nodded, unsurprised. What's our stock doing? Down 4% in early trading, but stabilizing. The market's confused. Half the analysts are praising your ethical stance, half are questioning the business impact. As they prepared for the board meeting, Gabriella's executive assistant, Taylor, entered with an alarmed expression. Ms. Washington, you need to see this. She handed over a tablet displaying a coordinated social media campaign attacking Neuratech. The hashtags, #boycott. Neuratech and fraudulent tech were gaining traction, accompanied by false claims about the company's technology failing in clinical trials. Who's behind this? Gabriella asked. It appears organized, Jordan said, examining the data. Too coordinated to be organic backlash. Before they could investigate further, Sophia arrived with more disturbing news. We're getting reports of racist threats against our employees. Someone doxed our engineering team. I've contacted security to increase patrols. The vibration of Gabriella's phone interrupted them. Her mother calling again. Mom, I'm heading into a meeting. Gabriella, there are reporters outside my house. Someone leaked my address online. Gabriella felt a cold wave of fear. Are you safe? Do you need me to send someone? Mrs. Jackson from next door invited me over. But baby, what's happening? They're saying terrible things about you online. It's backlash, Mom. I'll send security to bring you to my place until this dies down. After arranging protection for her mother, Gabriella tried to center herself for the board meeting. This was no longer just about standing up to discrimination. It was about saving her company from forces determined to punish her for doing so. The boardroom was tense when Gabriella entered. William Preston sat at the far end, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting old money confidence. At 62, he represented the old guard of venture capital, brilliant with finances but often tone-deaf on social issues. Gabriella, he began without preamble, we've called this emergency meeting to address yesterday's incident and its impact on shareholder value. "I appreciate your concern, William," Gabriella replied smoothly. "Jordan has prepared a comprehensive update on our alternative partnership options, which actually present improved terms compared to National Trust." Preston waved this away. "The issue isn't finding another bank. The issue is the manner of your decision-making. Walking away from a negotiated deal based on personal offense sets a concerning precedent." Another board member, Richard Chen, no relation to Jordan, spoke up. "William, with respect, I viewed the video. This wasn't merely personal offense. The treatment Ms. Washington received was objectively unacceptable." "No one is disputing that," Preston said, his tone suggesting he was indeed disputing it. "The question is whether the appropriate response was to terminate a partnership vital to the company's growth strategy." For the next hour, the board debated the decision. The room divided roughly along demographic lines: younger members and people of color supporting Gabriella, older white members backing Preston's concerns. The discussion grew increasingly heated until Preston finally laid his cards on the table. "The market is questioning your judgment, Gabriella. Our stock is down. Potential partners are nervous. We need to consider whether a temporary leave of absence might be appropriate while we repair relations with National Trust." The room fell silent. Preston had just suggested removing Gabriella as CEO of the company she had founded. Before Gabriella could respond, Jordan requested permission to present new information. "While preparing for this meeting, I conducted a deeper analysis of National Trust's banking practices. What I found suggests Gabriella's instincts were not just ethically sound, but financially prescient." Jordan displayed a series of charts showing National Trust's lending practices across Detroit neighborhoods. The data revealed a stark pattern of predatory lending and service denial in predominantly Black communities, precisely the communities Neurotech had prioritized in its hospital expansion plans. "National Trust has been under federal investigation twice for discriminatory practices," Jordan continued. "Partnering with them would have undermined our mission to serve underrepresented communities and exposed us to significant regulatory and reputational risk." Preston scoffed. "All major banks have faced similar scrutiny. This feels like post hoc justification." "Perhaps," Jordan acknowledged. "But there's more." She revealed communications indicating that National Trust had been simultaneously negotiating with Neurotech's main competitor, potentially positioning to share proprietary information. "So not only would we have partnered with an institution that fundamentally disrespects our CEO," Jordan concluded, "but we would have exposed ourselves to competitive intelligence risks and alienated the very communities we aim to serve." The mood in the room shifted. Even Preston looked troubled by the competitive intelligence revelation. The board voted to support Gabriella's decision and pursue alternative partnerships, though Preston and two allies abstained. As the meeting concluded, Gabriella's phone buzzed with an unexpected name: Cecilia Vanderbilt. "Ms. Washington," came the cultured voice when Gabriella answered privately. "I observed your situation with interest. Perhaps we could meet. I have information about National Trust that might prove illuminating." Cecilia Vanderbilt, the banking heiress who had questioned Gabriella's sudden wealth at the gala, was the last person Gabriella expected as an ally. Yet something in her tone suggested genuine concern rather than opportunism. "My office, 4 o'clock, Gabriella replied, curiosity overcoming caution. The rest of the day brought further developments. The viral video had spawned a movement, with Black professionals sharing similar experiences across industries. 3 major corporations announced they were reviewing their relationships with National Trust. Calvin Reynolds gave a second interview, now claiming he felt pressured by management to apply extra scrutiny to certain customers. By late afternoon, National Trust's CEO had issued a personal apology and announced a $50 million initiative for financial education in underserved communities, a transparent attempt at damage control that was already being criticized as insufficient. When Cecilia Vanderbilt arrived at Neurotech, she brought a leather portfolio and none of her usual condescension. "What I'm about to share comes from my family's long history with National Trust," she began once they were alone in Gabriella's office. "My grandfather sat on their board for 40 years. Old banking families talk, and what they say behind closed doors often differs from their public positions." She opened the portfolio to reveal internal documents and handwritten notes. "Harold Bennett has been under internal investigation for months. Complaints from female and minority employees about hostile work environments, discrimination in promotion practices. He was on thin ice before your incident." "Why are you sharing this?" Gabriella asked, suspicious of Cecilia's motives. "Because banking should be better than this," Cecilia replied with unexpected passion. "My family built institutions to serve communities, not demean them. What happened to you was emblematic of a rot that spread through the industry. Sometimes it takes someone walking away from $2 billion to expose that rot." After Cecilia left, Gabriella sat with this surprising alliance and the documents that confirmed her instincts about National Trust's culture. The stress of the day had taken its toll. A migraine threatened, and she hadn't eaten since morning. Yet there was no time for self-care. Her company was still under attack, her employees facing threats, her leadership questioned. In the strategy room, her core team had gathered to develop what Jordan had dubbed the Independence Plan, a partnership approach that would reduce Neuratech's reliance on any single financial institution. "Instead of one $2 billion partner," Jordan explained, "we create a consortium of smaller, community-focused banks, more administrative overhead, but greater stability and alignment with our values." As they worked late into the night, Gabriella felt both exhausted and strangely energized. The incident that had begun as a personal humiliation was transforming into something potentially revolutionary, not just for Neuratech, but for how business relationships were structured across industries. When she finally returned home, security guards now stationed outside her building, Gabriella checked on her mother, who was settled in the guest room. Then, for the first time since the bank lobby incident, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, sitting on the edge of her bed and letting the emotions of the past 36 hours wash over her. The exhaustion, the rage, the fear for her company, the vindication of standing her ground, the weight of being once again a reluctant standard-bearer for an issue larger than herself. Her phone chimed with a text from Jordan. "Turn on business tonight. You need to see this." Gabriella switched on the television to find William Preston being interviewed about the situation. "While I initially had concerns about the abrupt termination of the National Trust relationship," Preston was saying, his tone measured, "further information has convinced me that Ms. Washington's decision was not only principled but prescient. Neuratech will emerge stronger from this unfortunate incident." Gabriella stared in disbelief. Preston had evidently calculated which way the wind was blowing and adjusted his sails accordingly. His public support, however self-serving, would help stabilize Neuratech's position. As she finally prepared for sleep, Gabriella wondered what tomorrow would bring. The crisis wasn't over, but perhaps something important had begun. Something that might change not just her company's trajectory, but the standards to which powerful institutions were held. In the darkness of her bedroom, Gabriella made a decision. This wouldn't be just about surviving the backlash. It would be about creating a new model for banking partnerships, for corporate ethics, for leadership itself. National Trust had thrown her ID on the floor, but in doing so, they had inadvertently opened a door to something revolutionary. Dawn broke over Detroit as Gabriella completed her morning meditation, a practice that had sustained her through countless professional storms. Today would require particular clarity. The initial shock of the bank incident had evolved into a complex, multi-front battle for Neuratech's future and Gabriella's leadership. By 7 a.m., she had gathered her crisis response team in Neuratech's strategy room. Jordan Chen, CFO, Timothy Okafor, legal counsel, Sophia Rodriguez, PR director, Aidan Park, chief technology officer, and Riley Washington, no relation, chief of security. "Thank you all for coming in early," Gabriella began, standing at the head of the table. "The last 48 hours have been unprecedented, but today we pivot from reaction to action. First, the situation assessment," Jordan said, taking over. She displayed a comprehensive dashboard on the wall screen. Our stock stabilized yesterday after Preston's surprise support on Business Tonight. National Trust continues to hemorrhage value, down 17% total since the incident. They've announced an internal investigation and diversity training initiative. Too little, too late, Sophia commented. More importantly, Jordan continued, we've received partnership inquiries from 14 financial institutions, including 3 that specifically cited ethical alignment with our stance. Timothy spoke next. Legally, we're in a strong position. National Trust won't pursue breach of contract claims. They know a court case would only generate more negative publicity. However, we're seeing coordinated online attacks against both the company and Gabriella personally. Riley nodded grimly. Security is my top concern. We've enhanced measures at all facilities and for key personnel. Gabriella's mother has been moved to a secure location after the doxing incident. We're monitoring threats and coordinating with law enforcement. Aiden cleared his throat. From the tech side, we're seeing sophisticated attempts to access our systems, beyond typical corporate espionage. Someone's trying to find vulnerabilities in our neural interface patents. Gabriella absorbed this information, then outlined her vision. We need a multi-pronged strategy. First, financial stability. Jordan, I want options for replacing the National Trust partnership without compromising our hospital expansion timeline. Already working on the consortium approach, Jordan confirmed. Community banks with strong records in underserved areas. I've identified 7 potential partners. Second, Gabriella continued, we need to control the narrative. Sophia, this isn't just about neurotech anymore. It's become a flashpoint for larger issues of discrimination in financial services. I've engaged Blacklight Strategic Communications, Sophia replied. They specialize in navigating complex racial dynamics in corporate contexts. Their founder, Dr. Tamara Johnson, wants to speak with you directly. Set it up for today. Third, we need allies. I'm reaching out to the Black Business Leaders Coalition and the National Association of Women Entrepreneurs. We're stronger together. Has something like this ever happened to you or someone you know? The struggle against discrimination often feels lonely, but solidarity can be a powerful force. Comment number 1 if you believe in standing together against injustice, and hit that like button to support stories that expose these important issues. Subscribe to follow Gabriella's journey as she builds a powerful coalition. The team continued developing their strategy until a notification appeared on Timothy's tablet. Gabriella, we found something concerning. Harold Bennett has a history of discrimination complaints that were settled quietly. 3 from female executives and 2 from Black managers, all within the past 5 years. Can we access the settlement details? Gabriella asked. They're sealed, but I have a contact at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission who might provide context off the record. As Timothy pursued this lead, Jordan made a discovery of her own. I've been analyzing National Trust's lending data more deeply. They've been systematically redlining majority Black neighborhoods in Detroit while running community investment PR campaigns. Classic misdirection. Document everything, Gabriella instructed. This supports our position that the partnership would have compromised our values. By midday, Gabriella was conducting a carefully orchestrated interview with Eliza Montgomery, a respected journalist known for her balanced coverage of corporate ethics. Walking away from $2 billion is an extraordinary decision, Montgomery noted, her tone professional but curious. Many would have accepted the apology and proceeded with the partnership. Gabriella chose her words carefully. This wasn't an impulsive reaction to a single incident. What happened in that bank lobby was symptomatic of a culture incompatible with Neurotech's mission. Our neural interface technology serves diverse patient populations. We cannot partner with institutions that fail to recognize the humanity and dignity of all people. National Trust claims this was an isolated incident by a junior employee who has since been terminated. With respect, evidence suggests otherwise. The incident occurred after I was deliberately misdirected from the executive floor to retail banking. Furthermore, our research has uncovered a pattern of similar experiences among other Black professionals at National Trust branches. The interview continued in this vein, Gabriella maintaining professional composure while systematically dismantling National Trust's narrative. When it aired that evening, the response was immediate. Stand with Neuratech began trending nationally, countering the earlier attacks. As momentum shifted, an unexpected development occurred. 3 former customers of National Trust came forward with remarkably similar stories of discrimination at different branches. Their testimonies, combined with the viral video of Gabriella's experience, painted a damning picture of systemic issues rather than an isolated incident. Late that afternoon, Cecilia Vanderbilt returned to Neuratech with additional documents. These are internal memos regarding National Trust's enhanced scrutiny protocols, she explained. On paper, they're about fraud prevention. In practice, they're profiling guidelines that disproportionately target minorities and women. Why are you helping us? Gabriella asked directly, still wary of Cecilia's motives. Cecilia's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. My grandfather built Vanderbilt Financial on principles of community service. I watched National Trust absorb and corrupt those values after their merger 15 years ago. Perhaps I'm making amends for not speaking up sooner. As Gabriella prepared for the next day's emergency board meeting, where William Preston had requested a formal vote on leadership, Jordan received an unexpected call. Calvin Reynolds wants to talk, she reported, covering the phone. Says he has information about how he was instructed to handle certain customers. Put him on speaker, Gabriella decided after a moment's consideration. Calvin's voice was hesitant, lacking the arrogance he had displayed in the bank. Ms. Washington, I wanted to apologize, and to tell you that what happened wasn't just me I was following protocols. We were trained to apply extra scrutiny to transactions that seemed inconsistent with customer profile. Meaning? Meaning, when someone doesn't look like what we expect for high-value transactions. I was wrong to handle it the way I did, but I was also doing what I was trained to do. This admission from the very person who had humiliated her provided crucial evidence of institutional rather than individual bias. With Calvin's agreement to provide a formal statement, Gabriella had powerful ammunition for the board meeting. That evening, as Gabriella reviewed preparations with Jordan, her CFO shared a personal observation. You know, when we started Neuratech, I worried constantly about our survival. Now we're fighting for our soul, and somehow that feels more important. Gabriella nodded. This isn't the battle I chose, but it might be the one that matters most. Their conversation was interrupted by news that William Preston had been conducting separate meetings with board members, seeking support for a motion to temporarily replace Gabriella with an interim CEO less personally involved in the current controversy. He's still trying to push me out, Gabriella noted, more weary than angry. He won't succeed, Jordan assured her. We have the evidence, the alternative partnerships, and the ethical high ground. Ethics don't always win in boardrooms. No, but you do. Jordan's confidence was unwavering. You've overcome every obstacle thrown at you since we started. This is just one more. As night fell, Gabriella received an unexpected message from her childhood math teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, who had fought for her to enter the competitive science program decades ago. Saw you on the news, still breaking barriers after all these years. Some things don't change, the obstacles, your courage in facing them. I'm proud of you, Gabriella. The simple message brought tears to Gabriella's eyes. She had come so far from that determined girl in East Detroit, yet in many ways, the fundamental challenges remained the same, proving her worth in spaces that questioned her belonging. Tomorrow's board meeting would determine not just her leadership, but the company's direction. Would Neuratech prioritize profit over principle? Would the momentum of public support outweigh the pressure from traditional investors? Could a company founded on innovation pioneer a new approach to corporate ethics? As Gabriella finally settled into bed, physically exhausted but mentally alert, she reviewed her strategy one final time. She had the evidence, the alternatives, and most importantly, the conviction that she was fighting not just for herself, but for a fundamental shift in how business could be conducted. The question now was whether she could convince the board to see beyond the immediate financial implications to the transformative potential of this moment, not just for Neurotech, but for corporate America itself. What would you do in Gabriella's position facing tomorrow's crucial board meeting? Comment number 1 if you'd focus on the ethical argument, or number 2 if you'd emphasize the business case for standing firm. How do you think corporate leaders should respond when faced with discrimination? The most dramatic confrontation is yet to come. The atmosphere in Neurotech's boardroom crackled with tension. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the 20-person mahogany table where the company's fate would be decided. Board members spoke in hushed tones as they took their seats, dividing visibly into factions. Gabriella entered precisely at 9 o'clock, dressed in a tailored white suit that contrasted with the conservative navy and charcoal worn by most board members. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. This was about standing out, about visibility, about refusing to blend into expectations. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "Thank you all for convening on short notice. Before we address the agenda, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances that bring us together." William Preston, seated directly opposite Gabriella, checked his watch conspicuously. At 62, the venture capitalist represented old money power, Harvard Business School, 40 years in finance, and over $3 billion in successful investments. His silver hair and bespoke suit projected authority, and his reputation for ruthlessness in boardroom battles was well earned. "Let's dispense with pleasantries," Preston interrupted. "We're here to address a crisis of leadership that has placed shareholder value at significant risk. I've proposed a temporary leadership transition while we salvage the National Trust partnership." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Preston was making his move earlier and more aggressively than anticipated. "Mr. Preston," Gabriella replied calmly, "before we consider such a drastic measure, I believe the board deserves a complete picture of both the incident and its implications. Jordan Chen will present our financial assessment, followed by Timothy Okafor with relevant legal context." Preston frowned. "We've all seen the video, Gabriella. No one disputes that you experienced an unpleasant interaction. The question is whether your emotional response was appropriate for someone with fiduciary responsibility for a multi-billion-dollar company." The coded language wasn't subtle. By framing her decision as emotional, Preston was invoking stereotypes about women, particularly black women, being too temperamental for leadership. "I appreciate your concern for the company, William," Gabriella said, her tone measured. "And I welcome rigorous examination of my decision-making. That's precisely why we've prepared a comprehensive analysis rather than a reactionary defense." Before Preston could object further, Jordan began her presentation. The financial data was compelling. Neurotech stock had stabilized after an initial dip, while National Trust continued to decline. More importantly, the consortium of community banks Jordan had assembled offered terms that would actually accelerate their hospital expansion timeline compared to the original partnership. "In summary," Jordan concluded, "from a purely financial perspective, terminating the National Trust relationship and pursuing these alternative partnerships projects a 12% improvement in 5-year returns and reduces institutional risk through diversification." Preston scoffed. "Speculative projections based on preliminary conversations. National Trust offered certainty." "Did they?" Timothy asked, taking over the presentation. "Our investigation has uncovered significant concerns about National Trust as a business partner. The legal counsel displayed documentation of National Trust's history of discrimination complaints, regulatory investigations, and questionable lending practices in minority communities. Precisely the communities Neurotech had prioritized in its expansion. Partnering with National Trust would have created material risks to our brand, mission alignment, and potentially exposed us to regulatory scrutiny by association," Timothy explained. "Furthermore, we've discovered evidence that they were simultaneously negotiating with MindLink Technologies, our primary competitor." This revelation caused visible surprise among board members. MindLink was Neurotech's most aggressive competitor, with inferior technology but superior marketing. The implication that National Trust might have shared information between partners was disturbing. Preston, however, remained unmoved. Every major financial institution has regulatory issues and competitive intelligence concerns. These are standard business risks, not justification for unilateral termination of a negotiated agreement. There's nothing standard about having your identification thrown on the floor, said Dr. Amara Johnson, one of the board's independent directors and a neurosurgeon who had been among the first to implement Neurotech's interfaces. What happened to Gabriella wasn't a minor discourtesy. It was a fundamental breach of basic respect. With all due respect to Dr. Washington's personal experience, Preston countered, emphasizing personal. CEOs must separate individual affronts from company interests. Tesla doesn't cancel supplier contracts because Elon Musk experiences poor customer service. False equivalence, Gabriella interjected. This wasn't poor customer service. It reflected a corporate culture fundamentally at odds with Neurotech's values and mission. Our technology serves diverse patient populations. We cannot partner with institutions that demonstrate systemic bias. The debate continued, growing increasingly heated as board members took sides. Preston supporters emphasized fiduciary duty and the risks of emotional decision-making, while Gabriella's allies focused on ethical leadership and long-term brand integrity. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, Preston made his move. I move that Dr. Washington take a 30-day leave of absence, during which time Jordan Chen will serve as interim CEO to rebuild the relationship with National Trust. The room fell silent. This was it. The direct challenge to Gabriella's leadership. Second, said Richard Whitman, one of Preston's allies. Gabriella was about to respond when the boardroom door opened. Her executive assistant, Taylor, entered with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something the board needs to see. Taylor activated the room's large display screen, showing the lobby downstairs where a group of people in hospital gowns and medical equipment had gathered. What is this? Preston demanded. Patients, Gabriella answered, recognizing several faces. People whose lives have been saved by our neural interface technology. As the board watched, reporters interviewed the patients. A young woman with a neural implant described how Neurotech's device had stopped her debilitating seizures after conventional treatments failed. An older man explained how the interface had restored his ability to communicate after a stroke. A teenager demonstrated how the technology allowed him to control prosthetic limbs with unprecedented precision. One after another, they shared the same message. Neurotech had restored their lives when traditional medicine had given up. And they trusted Gabriella Washington's leadership because she had prioritized serving patients like them, many from underserved communities, when other companies focused on more profitable markets. This is a publicity stunt, Preston protested, but his objection lacked conviction. This is our mission made visible, Gabriella corrected. These are the lives we change. This is why I founded Neurotech and why I cannot compromise on the values that guide us. The emotional impact of the patients' testimonies was palpable. Even board members who had seemed aligned with Preston appeared moved. But the most dramatic moment was yet to come. The boardroom door opened again, revealing Cecilia Vanderbilt. Her unexpected appearance caused murmurs of confusion. Ms. Vanderbilt is not authorized to attend this meeting, Preston objected immediately. I've invited her as a material witness, Gabriella explained. Ms. Vanderbilt has information directly relevant to the motion before us. Cecilia approached the table with the confident bearing of someone born to wealth and power. Board members of Neurotech, I come before you with documentation that Mr. Preston has deliberately concealed from this body. She opened a leather portfolio and distributed copies of several documents. These are records of private meetings between William Preston and Harold Bennett of National Trust Bank, dating back 6 months before the partnership was proposed to Neurotech's executive team. Preston's face flushed. This is preposterous. Business leaders meet regularly. These weren't routine meetings, Cecilia interrupted. These were strategy sessions to position National Trust for privileged access to Neurotech's neural interface patents, with the explicit goal of creating licensing opportunities for mind-linked technologies. The revelation landed like a bombshell. Preston had significant investments in MindLink, a fact known to the board but previously considered an acceptable competitive tension. Furthermore, Cecilia continued, there are records of substantial trading of National Trust stock by entities connected to Mr. Preston immediately following Dr. Washington's departure from the bank. Trading patterns consistent with prior knowledge of a significant market-moving event. This is slander, Preston sputtered, but his composure had cracked. Timothy examined the documents closely. These appear authentic. If verified, they suggest Mr. Preston had conflicts of interest he failed to disclose, while advocating for the National Trust Partnership. The momentum in the room had shifted dramatically. Preston's motion to temporarily remove Gabriella now appeared not as prudent governance, but as a calculated attempt to advance his own financial interests. I believe, said Dr. Johnson firmly, that we should table Mr. Preston's motion and instead vote on whether to formally endorse Dr. Washington's decision to terminate the National Trust relationship. Second, came multiple voices simultaneously. The vote that followed was decisive. 12 in favor, 3 opposed, with Preston and his closest allies abstaining in silent fury. As the meeting concluded, Preston gathered his papers with barely controlled rage. This isn't over, Gabriella. You've won the battle but exposed the company to significant risk. When the consequences become apparent, remember this moment. I will, Gabriella replied evenly, as will everyone who witnessed your willingness to sacrifice this company's integrity for personal gain. Preston stormed out, followed by his allies. The remaining board members approached Gabriella with expressions ranging from relief to admiration. That was extraordinary, Dr. Johnson said quietly. But Preston won't go quietly. He's vindictive and well-connected. I know, Gabriella acknowledged. But we prevailed because we stood on principle and because we had the facts. That won't change. After the board members departed, Gabriella remained in the empty boardroom with Jordan and her core team. The victory had been decisive but exhausting, and the road ahead remained challenging. Preston will likely sell his shares, Jordan noted. We should prepare for the market impact. And he'll pursue legal avenues, Timothy added. Nuisance suits, regulatory complaints, anything to create friction. Gabriella nodded, taking in their concerns. We've weathered worse. More importantly, we've established that Neuratech's values aren't negotiable. That's worth whatever comes next. Looking out at the Detroit skyline, Gabriella felt both triumph and trepidation. The confrontation in the bank lobby had evolved into something far larger than a personal slight. It had become a public referendum on corporate ethics, on the compatibility of principle and profit, on the changing face of American business leadership. The battle with Preston was won, but the larger war for Neuratech's future and for the transformation of business culture itself was just beginning. Gabriella Washington, the girl from East Detroit who had overcome every obstacle to build a revolutionary company, now faced her greatest challenge yet, using her hard-won power to create lasting change. 3 weeks after the dramatic board showdown, Gabriella stood at a podium in Detroit's revitalized Riverfront Conference Center. Camera flashes punctuated the room as she prepared to make an announcement that would reshape not just Neuratech's future, but potentially the landscape of corporate finance relationships. Today, Neuratech is proud to announce a revolutionary partnership model for our global expansion, she began, her voice steady and purposeful. Rather than aligning with a single traditional institution, we have created the Community Health Financial Consortium, an alliance of 12 community-focused banks committed to serving diverse populations and reinvesting in underserved neighborhoods. Behind her, a screen displayed the logos of the partner banks, most smaller than National Trust, but collectively representing over $200 billion in assets. More importantly, each had demonstrated commitment to ethical lending practices and community investment. This consortium will provide the $2.3 billion in financing for our hospital expansion program, surpassing our original capital target, while ensuring that our financial infrastructure aligns with our core mission, making life-saving neural interface technology accessible to all communities, regardless of wealth or demographics. The press conference marked the public emergence of what Jordan had privately called the Gabriella Doctrine, a fundamental rethinking of how corporations structured their financial relationships. Rather than pursuing the path of least resistance with established banking giants, Neurotech had created a model that distributed both risk and opportunity across institutions with proven ethical practices. As Gabriella fielded questions from business journalists, the response was telling. Initial skepticism about managing multiple banking relationships gave way to recognition of the strategic advantages, from reduced institutional risk to enhanced community goodwill. "Dr. Washington," asked a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, "would you have pursued this consortium model if not for the incident at National Trust?" Gabriella considered the question carefully. Innovation often emerges from necessity. The unfortunate events at National Trust forced us to question conventional wisdom about corporate banking relationships. What we discovered was that the traditional model wasn't just ethically problematic, it was financially suboptimal. This consortium approach provides greater flexibility, reduced concentration risk, and stronger alignment with our values. The conference represented just one facet of Neurotech's strategic pivot. In the weeks following the board meeting, a remarkable wave of corporate and public support had emerged. The viral video of Gabriella's confrontation with Calvin Reynolds had sparked what media outlets were calling a corporate conscience movement. Black executives across industries had begun sharing similar experiences, creating a nationwide conversation about subtle discrimination in professional settings. Banking. While Black had evolved into leading. While Black, revealing a pattern of prejudice that had previously remained largely unacknowledged. More significantly, companies had begun following Neurotech's lead. 3 major technology firms had announced reviews of their banking relationships, specifically examining their partners' records on discrimination and community investment. A pharmaceutical giant had implemented new ethical requirements for financial partnerships, directly citing Gabriella's stand as inspiration. "We're seeing a fundamental shift in how corporate America views these relationships," explained Dr. Tamara Johnson, founder of Blacklight Strategic Communications, during a panel discussion with Gabriella. Traditionally, companies chose financial partners based solely on terms and capabilities. Now they're recognizing that these partnerships reflect and reinforce their values, for better or worse. Not everyone embraced this evolution. National Trust Bank's stock had partially recovered as they implemented damage control measures, firing Harold Bennett, announcing diversity initiatives, and pledging $100 million for financial literacy programs in underserved communities. But industry analysts noted these actions addressed symptoms rather than underlying cultural issues. Meanwhile, Calvin Reynolds had undergone his own transformation. After his initial angry interviews blaming Gabriella, he had gone silent for a week, then re-emerged with a thoughtful public apology. "I've spent time reflecting on my actions and the training that shaped them," he wrote in an open letter that went viral. "I realize now that I was enforcing unwritten rules designed to make certain people feel unwelcome in spaces of financial power. I'm committed to being part of the solution rather than perpetuating the problem." To Gabriella's surprise, Calvin had begun working with a nonprofit focused on financial inclusion, speaking about how institutional policies created environments where discrimination flourished. His redemption narrative added another dimension to the ongoing conversation. Within Neurotech, the aftermath of the National Trust incident had catalyzed internal changes as well. Gabriella had established an Ethics in Partnership Committee to evaluate all business relationships against clear standards for diversity, community investment, and workplace culture. The company had also accelerated its recruitment of talent from underrepresented groups, recognizing that diversification required proactive effort rather than passive openness. The most unexpected development had been the formation of the Business Equity Alliance, a coalition of companies committed to transforming corporate relationships. What had begun with Gabriella reaching out to a few trusted CEO friends had quickly expanded to include 47 companies representing over $300 billion in market capitalization. Their shared pledge to incorporate ethical standards into partnership decisions was reshaping how businesses evaluated relationships. Not all consequences had been positive. William Preston had made good on his threat of legal action, filing a shareholder lawsuit alleging breach of fiduciary duty. The suit was widely considered meritless, but created administrative burden and negative press. Preston had also liquidated his considerable Neurotech holdings, temporarily depressing the stock price before new, mission-aligned investors stepped in. More troublingly, Neurotech had experienced several sophisticated cyber attacks targeting their patent documentation. The company's security team had traced the attempts to shell companies with indirect connections to MindLink Technologies, Preston's other investment. While nothing had been compromised, the attacks underscored the powerful interests threatened by Gabriella's stand. Through it all, Gabriella had maintained a punishing schedule, leading Neurotech through its transformation while simultaneously becoming the reluctant face of a growing movement for corporate ethics. The toll on her personal life was significant. She had barely seen her mother except for Sunday dinners. Her exercise routine had been reduced to pre-dawn runs when her schedule allowed. Sleep had become a luxury rather than a necessity. "You need to pace yourself," Jordan cautioned during a rare quiet moment in Gabriella's office. "This is a marathon, not a sprint." "I know," Gabriella acknowledged, rubbing her temples against a persistent headache. "But we have momentum now. We can't waste it." "You won't help the movement by burning out," Jordan insisted. "You're not just running a company anymore, you're leading a revolution. That requires sustainability." The truth of Jordan's words was evident in Gabriella's exhaustion. Yet the stakes felt too high for moderation. Each day brought new opportunities to advance the cause that had found her, to transform a moment of personal humiliation into lasting institutional change. The balance between private leader and public symbol was one Gabriella navigated daily. When she appeared on the cover of Business Week under the headline, "The Conscience of Corporate America," the weight of expectation had grown heavier. She was no longer just a successful CEO, but a standard-bearer for a new approach to business ethics. This was the context for today's announcement of the Community Health Financial Consortium, not just a practical solution to Neurotech's banking needs, but a visible manifestation of the principles Gabriella had come to represent. As the press conference concluded, a reporter from Tech Innovator magazine asked the question Gabriella had been anticipating. "Dr. Washington, some critics suggest your stance against national trust was an overreaction to a single incident. How would you respond?" Gabriella stepped away from the prepared podium, choosing to address the question directly rather than from behind a barrier. What happened at National Trust wasn't a single incident. It was a symptom of systemic issues that affect millions of Americans daily. When my ID was thrown on the floor, I had a choice. Accept the disrespect as the price of doing business, or insist on a world where dignity isn't sacrificed for profit. She paused, making eye contact with various journalists in the room. The consortium we've announced today isn't just about Neurotech's financial structure. It's about recognizing that business relationships are moral choices with real consequences for communities. Every dollar we deploy through these community banks will strengthen neighborhoods like the one I grew up in. Every partnership we form reflects our values in action. This isn't abstract ethics. It's practical impact. The response garnered a spontaneous round of applause, unusual for a business press conference. Gabriella had struck a chord that resonated beyond investment metrics and quarterly projections. Later that afternoon, as Neurotech's stock closed up 12% on news of the consortium, Gabriella received an unexpected visitor. Calvin Reynolds, the very bank teller who had thrown her ID on the floor, had requested a brief meeting. After careful consideration, Gabriella had agreed. The meeting was arranged in a neutral location, a conference room at the Detroit Innovation Center, with security present but unobtrusive. Calvin entered nervously, the confident dismissiveness he had displayed at the bank entirely absent. "Dr. Washington, thank you for seeing me. I know you have every reason to refuse." "Why did you want this meeting, Mr. Reynolds?" Gabriella asked directly. "To apologize in person, and to help if I can. He placed a folder on the table between them. These are training materials from National Trust, the official protocols, and the unofficial guidance we received about identifying unusual transactions. There's a clear pattern of racial profiling embedded in the training, though it's never explicitly stated. Gabriella examined the documents, recognizing their potential value for ongoing diversity initiatives and possibly legal actions. Why are you sharing this? Calvin met her gaze directly for the first time. Because what I did to you was wrong, but I didn't invent that behavior. It was cultivated. The system identified targets and deputized people like me to enforce invisible boundaries. I want to help dismantle that system. Their conversation continued for 30 minutes, not as victim and perpetrator, but as two people working through the complexities of institutional prejudice. By the end, Gabriella had offered Calvin a consulting role with the Business Equity Alliance, focusing on identifying and addressing discriminatory financial practices. People will question my motives, Calvin acknowledged as the meeting concluded. Let them, Gabriella replied. Redemption isn't about popularity. It's about doing the work. As summer turned to fall, Neurotech's transformation accelerated. The Community Health Financial Consortium proved remarkably effective, with the distributed banking model providing unexpected advantages in regulatory compliance and community engagement. The neural interface technology expanded to 37 new hospitals, including 15 in traditionally underserved areas. Most significantly, Gabriella's public advocacy had helped spark a broader reevaluation of corporate ethics. The Business Equity Alliance had grown to include over 100 companies, including 3 Fortune 50 corporations. Their collective implementation of partnership standards was creating market pressure for financial institutions to improve their practices regarding diversity and community investment. National Trust Bank, still struggling to repair its reputation, had announced a complete restructuring of its executive leadership and customer service protocols. Their new CEO had publicly admitted the bank's culture had fostered discriminatory practices and pledged comprehensive reform, a level of accountability unprecedented in the financial industry. For Gabriella personally, the journey had been both exhausting and exhilarating. The girl from East Detroit who had fixed her father's salvaged computer had now catalyzed a movement that was changing how America did business. The humiliation of having her ID thrown on the marble floor had transformed into a moment of power, not just for her, but for everyone who had experienced similar indignities without the platform to respond. On a crisp October morning, as Gabriella prepared for a keynote address at the National Business Ethics Conference, she received news that William Preston's lawsuit had been dismissed with prejudice, a complete legal vindication of her decision to terminate the National Trust partnership. "Congratulations," Jordan said, bringing champagne into Gabriella's office to celebrate. "Preston's crusade is officially over." Gabriella smiled, allowing herself a moment of personal satisfaction. One battle won, many more ahead. "Always the revolutionary," Jordan teased, pouring 2 glasses. "Can't you just enjoy the victory?" "I enjoy every victory," Gabriella replied, accepting the champagne. "But I measure success differently now. It's not just about Neurotech's stock price or market share. It's about whether we're creating the world I want my future children to live in, one where no one's ID gets thrown on the floor because of how they look." As they toasted, Gabriella's phone rang. The Detroit Medical Center calling with news that their first neural interface procedure using Neurotech's technology had been successfully completed. A 12-year-old girl from Gabriella's old neighborhood was now seizure-free after years of failed treatments. In that moment, everything connected. The personal stand that had launched a movement, the business transformation that had expanded their reach, the child whose life was changed because Neurotech had remained true to its mission. The revolution Gabriella had reluctantly led was having tangible impact, one life at a time. What had begun with humiliation in a bank lobby had evolved into something profound, a fundamental reconsideration of how business could be conducted. The partnership that had ended in silence had given voice to a movement that was only beginning to realize its potential. The gleaming auditorium of the Global Leadership Forum fell silent as Gabriella Washington took the stage. 1 year had passed since the incident at National Trust Bank, a year that had transformed not just her company, but had catalyzed a movement reshaping corporate America's approach to ethics, inclusion, and community responsibility. "Leadership isn't measured in moments of comfort," Gabriella began, her voice carrying through the packed room. "It's defined by what we do when dignity and profit appear to be in conflict. When my identification was thrown on the floor that day, I faced a choice familiar to many who have been marginalized: accept the disrespect as the cost of advancement, or stand firm at the risk of losing everything I'd built." The audience, CEOs, policymakers, and thought leaders from around the world, listened intently as Gabriella accepted the Global Ethics in Business Award, the most prestigious recognition in corporate leadership. "What began as a personal stand has evolved into collective progress," she continued. "Today, I'm proud to report that the Business Equity Alliance has grown to over 200 companies committed to ethical partnership standards. More importantly, these standards are delivering measurable results: increased investment in underserved communities, improved diversity in corporate leadership, and enhanced long-term shareholder value." The statistics supported her claims. Companies that had adopted the Alliance's partnership principles had outperformed market indices by an average of 9%. Financial institutions with strong records on inclusion were gaining market share. A new generation of business leaders was emerging with the understanding that ethical considerations were not separate from business decisions, but integral to them. As Gabriella concluded her acceptance speech, the standing ovation reflected not just respect for her personal journey, but recognition of a fundamental shift in corporate culture. What skeptics had initially dismissed as an emotional overreaction had proven to be visionary leadership, challenging long-standing practices that had marginalized communities and limited economic opportunity. Back at Neurotech's headquarters the following day, the company's transformation was evident. Under the Community Health Financial Consortium model, their expansion had exceeded all projections. The neural interface technology was now available in 127 hospitals across the country, including 42 in traditionally underserved areas. Clinical outcomes showed dramatic improvements for patients with previously untreatable neurological conditions. Most remarkably, Neurotech's market value had grown to $9.3 billion, a 60% increase since terminating the National Trust partnership. What Preston and others had predicted would be a costly moral stand had instead launched an era of unprecedented growth and impact. "The quarterly numbers are in," Jordan announced, entering Gabriella's office with a tablet displaying the latest financial reports. Revenue up 22% year over year. Patient outcomes exceeding benchmarks across all demographics. The consortium model is being studied at Harvard Business School as a case study in ethical finance. "And community impact?" Gabriella asked, prioritizing the metric she considered most meaningful. Jordan smiled, knowing her friend's values. "The consortium banks have increased lending in underserved Detroit neighborhoods by 47%. Small business formation in those areas is up 17%. The ripple effects are just beginning." Their conversation was interrupted by Gabriella's assistant announcing that Calvin Reynolds had arrived for their scheduled meeting. The former bank teller who had thrown her ID on the floor now served as Director of Inclusive Banking Practices for the Business Equity Alliance. A remarkable journey of redemption. "Dr. Washington," Calvin greeted her as he entered, professional but still somewhat awestruck in her presence. "The banking reform legislation passed the House committee yesterday. Our coalition's testimony was cited extensively in the bill language. The legislation represented a significant policy victory, establishing clear standards for equitable banking practices and meaningful consequences for institutions that engaged in discriminatory behavior." Calvin's first-hand testimony about how National Trust had trained employees to profile customers had been particularly influential in the committee hearings. "Excellent work, Calvin," Gabriella acknowledged. "From incident to legislation in 12 months. That's unprecedented progress." Calvin nodded, his expression reflecting the gravity of his personal transformation. I never imagined that the worst mistake of my career would lead to meaningful change. Thank you for seeing potential where others would have seen only an enemy." After their meeting, Gabriella turned her attention to another significant development: National Trust Bank's comprehensive restructuring under new leadership. Following months of declining market share and regulatory scrutiny, the bank's board had replaced the entire executive team and implemented sweeping reforms developed in consultation with the Business Equity Alliance. The press release on Gabriella's desk announced the appointment of Cecilia Vanderbilt as National Trust's new chairperson, an unexpected but fitting evolution for the banking heiress who had helped expose the institution's problematic practices. Under Cecilia's leadership, National Trust had implemented the industry's most rigorous anti-discrimination protocols and committed $500 million to community development in historically redlined neighborhoods. "Full circle," Gabriella murmured, remembering Cecilia's condescension at the gala a year earlier. People could change when confronted with truth, sometimes dramatically. Later that afternoon, Gabriella left the office early for the most meaningful event of her year: the grand opening of the Neurotech Innovation Campus in East Detroit, just blocks from where she had grown up. The $100 million facility would serve as both a research center for next-generation neural interfaces and an educational hub, providing technology training for neighborhood residents. As her car approached the campus, Gabriella was moved to see hundreds of community members gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Children from local schools, small business owners, medical professionals, and longtime residents had come together to celebrate what many were calling a transformation for the neighborhood. Among the waiting crowd, Gabriella spotted her mother standing with Mrs. Jenkins and other neighbors who had helped raise her, the women who had watched her journey from determined child to revolutionary business leader. Their pride was palpable, their presence a reminder of where she had come from and why her work mattered. The ceremony itself was brief, but powerful. After acknowledging the many contributors to the project, Gabriella invited a special guest to join her for the ribbon cutting: 12-year-old Zoe Campbell, the first patient from East Detroit to receive Neurotech's neural interface. Once debilitated by seizures that conventional medicine couldn't control, Zoe now stood confidently beside Gabriella, her future full of possibilities that had seemed impossible a year earlier. "This campus represents more than buildings and technology," Gabriella told the assembled crowd. "It represents a commitment to ensuring that innovation serves everyone, not just those in privileged positions or wealthy communities. When we expand opportunity, we expand human potential." As Gabriella and Zoe cut the ribbon together, cheers erupted from the community that had produced them both. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. This was a full-circle moment. The girl from East Detroit returning to create opportunities for the next generation of innovators. The tour that followed showcased state-of-the-art laboratories, classrooms equipped with advanced technology, and community spaces designed for collaboration. But the most powerful moment came when Gabriella showed her mother the main research building with Washington Neural Innovation Center emblazoned across its facade. "Your father would be so proud," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the family name displayed prominently on the building. "He always said you were meant for greatness. He gave me my start," Gabriella replied, thinking of the broken computer her father had brought home from the recycling center all those years ago. "Everything began with believing I could fix what others had discarded." As the day's events concluded, Gabriella found herself drawn to one final meeting. Zoe Campbell had asked to introduce her to another young girl from the neighborhood, 10-year-old Aisha Taylor, who had created a rudimentary AI program on a school computer and dreamed of someday becoming a tech CEO, just like Dr. Washington. Seated in the campus atrium with Aisha, Gabriella recognized herself in the girl's eager questions and determined expression. "The path won't always be easy," she told Aisha honestly. "There will be people who underestimate you, systems designed to exclude you, moments when you question whether it's worth the fight." "Were you scared?" Aisha asked, her bright eyes fixed on Gabriella's face. "Many times," Gabriella admitted, "but I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more." For me, that was creating technology that could help people who had been written off by the medical establishment. "I want to build robots that can clean polluted water," Aisha confided. "My cousin got sick from drinking bad water, and I want to fix that." Gabriella smiled, recognizing the same pattern that had driven her own innovation: personal connection to a problem that needed solving. "That's a wonderful goal. And you know what? The path will be easier for you than it was for me, because of all the people who walked it before." "Like you," Aisha said with admiration. "Like me," Gabriella agreed. "And like all the other pioneers who refused to let their IDs stay on the floor." As twilight fell over the new campus, Gabriella stood alone for a moment, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. What had begun in humiliation and anger had transformed into a movement with tangible impact, changed policies, reformed institutions, expanded opportunities, saved lives. The silence that had followed her departure from National Trust Bank had given way to a powerful voice, not just her own, but a chorus of leaders committed to a new vision of corporate responsibility. The partnership that had ended so abruptly had been replaced by something far more valuable: a coalition built on shared values rather than mere financial convenience. Looking out at the Detroit skyline from her old neighborhood, now home to cutting-edge neural research, Gabriella felt the weight and wonder of the journey. The girl who had fixed broken computers had grown into a woman who was helping fix broken systems. The CEO who had walked away from $2 billion had helped create something more valuable: a new foundation for American business built on dignity, inclusion, and shared prosperity. As night fell on the anniversary of the bank incident, Gabriella Washington, daughter of Detroit, pioneering neuroscientist, reluctant revolutionary, allowed herself to fully appreciate how far she had come and how much further there was still to go. What do you think about Gabriella's journey from humiliation to transformation? Has someone ever underestimated you based on your appearance or background? Comment below with your experiences standing up against discrimination. If this story inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others find strength in their own challenging moments. Thank you for joining me for this powerful story of dignity, resilience, and the courage to create lasting change. Gabriella Washington's story teaches us that true leadership requires unwavering commitment to dignity and values, even when it seems financially risky. By refusing to accept disrespect and discrimination, she catalyzed transformation far beyond her company. Her journey shows that what appears to be a career-threatening moment can become a powerful opportunity for positive change. The story reminds us that systems don't change until someone refuses to accept the status quo. One person standing firm on principle can inspire others to examine their own experiences and speak out. When Gabriella walked away from that $2 billion deal, she demonstrated that dignity is non-negotiable. We learned that effective change requires both moral courage and strategic thinking. Gabriella didn't just make an emotional stand. She built a better alternative through her banking consortium and created lasting institutional change. Her approach proves that ethical leadership and business success aren't opposing forces, but complementary strengths. Perhaps most importantly, the story illustrates how representation matters. When Gabriella returned to her Detroit neighborhood to build the Innovation Campus, she created a pathway for future generations. Sometimes, the most revolutionary act is showing others what's possible when you refuse to let your identification remain on the floor.